Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to kick off this week's theme of title tracks, looking at songs who share a name with the album. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I don't put any track length limits on the themes. That's how we end up with 42 minutes of music like this. Dream Theater's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. This comes off of the album of the same name and is the sixth and final track. Spotify, however, doesn't break it up into, or doesn't have it as a single track. It breaks it up into the 8 movements. Overture, About to Crash, War Inside My Head, The Test That Stumped Them All, Goodnight Kiss, Solitary Shell, About to Crash, Reprise, and Losing Time Grand Finale. So you will see the movements over here, which I think is pretty nice. But we are going to listen to all of it in one go. I will be taking notes as well, just so that I can, make sure that I don't forget semi-important stuff. Most of the important stuff I think I'll be able to keep a tally of. But this is a long one. Let's get into it. Without further ado, Dream Theater's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Interesting. Bit of a marching snare, but very epic. Symphony work? Ooh. So that's taking parts of the previous section, reinterpreting it in this orchestral version. I mean, it's okay. That's interesting. We went from romantic to baroque. This is the third distinct section, though. So far, everything has been a bit iterative, but it's done really well. That's such a Dream Theater idea right there. Moving chords in the orchestra while having this really rhythmic single note pedal tone underneath on the rock bands. Yeah, so part 4. Looking at the time, Are there going to be 6 different ideas in here? These are the 6 degrees. It's also called Overture, so I wonder if these are going to be the 6 main themes that we hear across this 40-minute suite. That is a very gentle section. Kind of Christmassy just because of the bells, but there's also like a positive wistfulness, longing for a better time that a lot of the 50s iconic Christmas songs have. Oh, weird phrasing and a retardando in there. Yeah, I think we passed 6 themes here. There are 7 tracks. Another iterative idea that just works so well there. I guess there are 7 tracks. About to Crash, we see twice. Maybe there are 7 themes in here? Lovely piano line. Got that contemporary rock vibe. Now, granted, this came out years prior, but this is the kind of music that reminds me of Frost.
She can't stop pacing. She never felt so alive. Her thoughts are racing.
Yeah, I got a nice 7 here. Ooh, that cymbal works nice too. Tossing in some fun little expressive ideas.
He helplessly stands by. It's meaningless to try. As he rubs his red-rimmed eyes, he says, I've never seen her get this bad. Even though she seems so high, knows that she can't fly.
Ooh, a little bit of darkness here.
Now she sleeps the days away. Helplessly stands by. It's meaningless to try, and all she wants to do is cry. No one ever knew she was so sad. 'Cause even though she gets so high and thinks that she can fly, she will fall out of the sky. But in the face of misery, she found hopefulness. Feeling better, she had weathered this depression.
So that was a nice 5 section. Ooh, what?
Much to her message, she resumed a frantic pace. Boundless past midnight hour, she enjoyed the
Excellent bass work. We have a 3/4 here. We had a little bit of a rise there to enter our transition. So a heavy, eerie riff, pedal tone. A little bit of a metalcore vibe here. Not anymore. You know what's funny is the title reminds me of the chorus to Sweating Bullets by Megadeth. And this dude's pulling off an okay Dave Mustaine right now. Despite the metric mod on beats 3 and 4, it's still just 4/4. That's a short movement. Another 7. Very fast 7. And very sharp, deliberate too. It's aggressive not just on speed, but in delivery. Oh, tone as well. I mean, this is full on metal here. The shifting of the backbeat to the front beat. Whoa, the dotted quarter. Yeah. Also, why does this sound like a proggy Metallica early? Justice for All era? All the snare too. Alright.
Just a place to fix himself from himself.
Oh, of course, when I pick up on the pattern.
Searching for the light, the smell of stale sweat and shit steaming through the night. Random urine testing, pills red, pink and blue. Counseling and therapy, finding not a clue. Still the cake made between these hollow walls. Hoping to find in me the answers to the test to stop them all.
Lots of pedal tone on this though. And that's like a thrash staple.
We can't seem to find the answers. We cannot just let them live here. Why don't we try shock treatment? We have just the tools to fix him. From himself.
It's a gnarly guitar tone. Or maybe that's the synth? The keyboard? Got some groove metal on the solo. Dude, that drum pattern. Dude, the phrasing is wild for 7. We're not in 7. Alternating 7 and 8. That was 15. This is 7. Very moody, very brooding. That was a fast 5 minutes. Ooh. He's got what are they? Piccolo drums. they really shine against all the snares and toms. So very beach-like?
Goodnight kiss in your nightgown, lavender in your bed, so innocent as you lie down, sweet dreams that run through your head. Are you lonely without mommy's love? I want you to know I'd die for.
So they brought in some tensions, kind of resolved it, bringing it back, leading to resolution. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Absolutely gorgeous. Solid bass tone too.
It's been 5 years to the day my tainted blood still the same.
So I think I'd call this so far a symphonic pop ballad or symphonic prog ballad.
Those bastard doctors are gonna pay.
A little bit of pop rock, but the piano gives it a little more than that. That one chord carries so much weight. Also, the I'm Just a Poor Girl sounds so much like Queen Bohemian Rhapsody. It's the phrasing of it, but also the delivery of the words. Tambourine. Like kind of fully working in like a positive optimism. Triplet mod in a ballad like this it's cliche, but it works so well. It's just the right thing to do. And we heard it again there. Okay. Ooh, a little bit of bluesiness in there. Laughter, crying, screaming all back to back. What is going on here? The laughter doesn't make sense, but we have an EKG. I think that's what that's called. So we have something medical going on here. Goodnight kiss. Could this be about the death of a loved one? Still doesn't make the laughter make any sense. Ooh! That's a sick little idea there. Rising and falling arpeggiation? Oh, what is this pop rock guitar work?
He seemed no different from the rest, just a healthy, normal boy.
Why does this remind me a little of like Mumford and Sons? Just a little bit, not like.
He learned to walk and talk on time, but never cared much to be held. Insteadly, he would decline.
So this is a 7, but instead of 4 and 3, it's 3 and 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 extension. You get that 1 beat extension every other bar. Very country though.
He was fine. He's a Monday morning lunatic, distant from time to time.
It's not Mumford and Sons. What is this? It's like the pop country of the 2000s. More marching snare. That's the 3rd time in this album. Yeah, pop country isn't right either. Some weird smash up of like vulnerable pop rock with a dash of country, pop country.
He was helplessly behind. He poured himself onto the page, writing for hours at a time.
So I think what they're going for here is something vulnerable and down to earth. Very average Joe, but I'm bearing my soul to you.
He was drifting in and out of sanity, but in every other way he was fine. He's a Monday morning lunatic, distant from time to time.
I've heard so much music like this in my life. It's sort of hilarious to hear Dream Theater producing this. moving back into that symphonic prog. That 15, 16, just a hair bit longer than 7. A little jazzy thing there. We're moving back into Crash Reprise. I wonder if we're going to go back to that contemporary progressive rock sounds. Or if we're simply going to revisit some of the composition with a different sound, genre, texture. Nope, that's a different sound. Why am I getting hair metal from this? Not hair metal. Kind of still not contemporary rock, but a little heavier. Yeah, actually this does remind me of Crash 1, just a little darker, a little heavier. I think that's the same lick though.
I'm alive again, the darkness far behind me. I'm invincible, despair will never find me.
Okay, but I do hear a little hair metal in this. A little bit. The triplet mod, very popular with this drummer. Is that Portnoy?
When I fall out of the sky, who'll be standing by?
The dotted quarter transition there. 6/8, a bit more groovier. Kind of a folk element here. The drummer, what's he doing? Polyrhythm, alright. Back to the marching snare. Yeah, I like that tone. there's that Christmas part again. Sort of a medley of a lot of different ideas that are kind of moving into each other more fluidly than I would expect. A lot of energy building into this transition. Got a 6 going on here. But you can really feel it as 2, 1, 2, a really slow 2/4.
Dresses in black every day. She keeps her hair simple and plain.
Arpeggiating guitar, sparse drumming, light vocal work.
She doesn't recall yesterday. Faces seem twisted and strange.
It took this grandiose opening and really stripped it down. A little bluesy run up. Oh, I love that harmony. I want to hear a version of this where he shoots up on that 5th syllable. Oh, dude, bringing back that Baroque harmonic movement. Yeah, dude, that positive vibe here, once again. A not so subtle tempo shift into a ritardando. Slow it down just to slow it down some more.
Deception of fame, vengeance of war, life's torn apart. Losing oneself, spiraling down, failing the walls closing in. A journey to find the answers inside. I
so we had a big hopeful finish with 2 minutes to go. And a gong. Why a gong? This is not going to be a 2-minute fade out, is it? Please, please don't do this to me. I think they're gonna do this. Why? Dream Theater, you're gonna make me utter a new phrase. I don't know if anyone said this before. Why do we got gong drone? Gong drone, I don't like it. All right. Before we get into much of anything, which I wrote down 360 words apparently, 2,200 characters. I took a few notes on this. But before I get into any of the song, I just want to say that it's very interesting to finally hear where Circus Maximus gets their inspiration from. I always knew that listening to most of their tracks, there's just a big Dream Theater influence to them. But they do have one song, which we've actually checked out on the channel. You can check it out there. It's called, I can't remember what it's called. It's right there. Just go click on it. And it's like a 15 or 20-minute epic with a lot of orchestral elements to it. And a lot of it sounds like this song. This is a very different side to Dream Theater than I've heard before. Most of what I've been exposed to is definitely prog metal. And it's Dream Theater's specific brand of progressive metal. It's very difficult to confuse them for anyone else. And when you hear this sound, your first thought is always, oh, they must love Dream Theater. Like, Dream Theater just has a very definitive sound that's influenced so many bands. But I've always gotten like their brand of metal. You know, we've checked out Stream of Consciousness. We've checked out Octavarium, whatever that track is. It's about 8. That also, you know, just I'll toss that one up in the corner too. You can check that one out. But I've listened to more of their strictly metal music. And of course, you know, they always have their pianist and synth player. His name escapes me. I apologize. I'll look that up later to correct myself on it. But I don't think I've heard anything with like full-on orchestral, let's put classical elements into our music. Let's be influenced by some of the best film soundtracks, film scores, and you know, romantic era classical music. There's a dash of Baroque in here from time to time, but a lot of their inspiration seems to be romantic era classical, which is the era of classical that was really about like capturing ideas, capturing emotions or vibes in music. How do we make music for a forest? How do we make music for, you know, love that anyone can just pick up on? This is obviously a love song. A lot of the romantic era went in this direction. to me, it's very easy to spot when I hear it. I'm like, oh yeah, definitely Romantic Era, because it's just so equivocally this vibe right here. Um, and it works really well for film scores. Disney was using the romantic sound in much of their early animated films. It's an easy thing to pair with media. And it also can be stripped down very easily to something that fits in the background, so it can influence the emotion of a scene without dominating the listener's attention, right? They're still focused on the actors or, on the scene itself. The music's just informing the emotional quality of it. And it shows up all around in this track. But I've just never heard that part of Dream Theater before. So it was cool to see this. There's obviously a lot of metal in here. I think most of the tracks generally lean towards their more traditional prog metal sound. There's a lot of callbacks to other stuff. We're going to touch on that later. But it seems the orchestral part is either downplayed in most of these tracks or not present at all. The two exceptions are the finale, the last movement, and the overture, the first movement. So let's start with the overture. This is a pretty cool track. It is quite disparate. Many of the ideas do not connect with the other, which makes sense for an overture. It's usually a sort of medley of ideas or themes that are going to be present elsewhere in the work. What's interesting is I didn't catch much of that. It makes me want to go back to the overture now that I've heard all of the other movements and see if I can't pick out themes. Oh yeah, I remember that from this track, stuff like that. Because otherwise I'm just given a lot of information, 8 different motifs and feelings and atmospheres, and they're like, remember these for the next hour of your life. Like, it's not going to happen. There's so much music coming at me that I'm not going to be able to make those connections on just a first time listen. Although I think I did make one. In Crash Reprise, I mentioned hearing an idea that I associated with Crash, the original, Movement 2, but I actually think came from the Overture. That's something I have to double back on and check out on a second listen. But I think that's what happened there. It was the only time that I recognized something from previously, and I assumed, oh, this is the Reprise. I probably heard it there, but it was actually played by some strings, which makes me think that it might have been one of the themes used in Overture. Regardless, there seems to be like 7 to 9 different sections here. I was kind of hoping there were 6 to line up with the 6 degrees idea that they have in the title, but I think there was like 6 to 9 or 7 to 9 in there. And they were across a plethora of ideas, most of it focusing on a purely, not a purely, but a focus on orchestral writing, lots of string and brass and woodwind present. There is a dash of metal in most of them. Sometimes an electric guitar will come up and be present, but a lot of it seems to focus on the orchestral side, which is interesting because we get the inverse of that in the rest of the album, assuming that some of these, I was like 7 to 9. There's 7 more tracks. Maybe there was 7 sections to it. That's another thing I'd have to go back and check. Just like really keep track of all the new themes that show up and pair them to motifs that show up in other tracks. Figure out what's connected there. Anyways, everywhere else, though, we get more of a metal variation on these ideas, which also makes it more distinct and more difficult to pick up on later on in the listen. Another thing that made it difficult to notice if there were any thematic similarities between the tracks and Overture. But I really like the orchestral writing here. It has a strong mix of, as I mentioned, romantic ideas, but the occasional Baroque concept too. And Baroque is one of the older classical styles and is very sharp, tends to be very dark, is a bit more technical than romantic. And pretty much if you think of classical music, Baroque's probably what you're thinking of. It is one of the more iconic and well-known eras of classical. And we did see a couple sections in here that primarily leaned into the harmonies of Baroque, which tend to be a little darker. A lot of Baroque music, despite being very popular at the time as just great sounds to listen to, are now associated with Halloween. If at least in America, if you go to a Halloween shop around August, October, September, well, probably September. I don't think we have Halloween shops popping up in August yet. And you go buy like a generic disc of scary songs to play in your haunted house, you're going to get half that disc is probably going to be Baroque tracks. um, so, yeah, it brings a little bit of darkness that the romantic side typically doesn't have. The romantic side of the composition here tends to lean towards melancholic, not dark. A little bit of melancholy, though, and most often than not, some sort of powerful feeling. There's epic vibes we have, there's hopeful vibes, there's just generally joyful elements coming from a lot of the themes, too. And another thing that I noticed in this section is that many of these themes tend to have a soundtrack-like quality to it, where they're definitely solid things to listen to by themselves as, the core work of art, but a lot of it feels like it's designed to be paired with something else. It influences an emotion, but doesn't have what I would say is enough going on in it to justify, in a sense, being the exclusive part of art. A lot of the sections here feel like they're designed either to be expanded upon, which also might be why they're difficult to recognize on a first time listen elsewhere, because maybe there's more embellishment, maybe there's extra parts around it. Maybe it is the foundation that a song is built on top of, so you really have to like drill down to the core to find it. But it feels like either that, where it's a foundation to build upon, or there's sections that are best used in something multimedia, maybe to go along with an art exhibit or to use in the background of a scene in a film or something like that. It's strongly written. I'm not saying it's poorly written. It just doesn't have as much going on for it that really feels like a solid singular experience. Like I said, I kind of define that as soundtrack-like quality. Good enough to listen to, but probably pairs well with other things also. So that's the overture. We move into Crash. We got a nice little piano intro here and a strong contemporary rock vibe. This comes back several times in here. This is what I call the Frost style of prog rock. Obviously, they got it from Dream Theater. As I mentioned, lots of prog bands are influenced by Dream Theater. But to me, I think I will just always associate it with Frost. I think they do it best right now. And it was one of the earliest bands that I remember listening to that used this style. Again, when it comes to Dream Theater, I have very limited exposure to them. I think I heard Metropolis Parts 1 and 2 when I was in high school. My friend was obsessed with that album. And I think that was about it until I started this channel. And people were like, hey, you got to check out all these. Did we do Dance of Eternity? I think so. If not, that might be another one that I heard prior to starting the channel. But like I said, very limited, mostly metal side of them. So it's interesting to hear this rockier style. And like I said, my first exposure to it was Frost. And if you're looking for that band, you're like, hey, who is Frost? They have a little asterisk at the end of their name. I like to call them Frost Star, but apparently you just pronounce it Frost. But they do a fantastic, if you like Crash, especially the first couple of minutes of it, go check out Frost. They're going to be right up your alley. Let me toss one. This is just going to be the day when I just promote all my other reactions. I don't usually put this many in one video. Contemporary rock vibe, though, very light, catchy, poppy vocals. Generally, the guitar work is light. There's a piano that's also fairly light in here. It's just very digestible. What I tend to call this is the kind of rock music you would put out in public because even your grandparents would find it acceptable. That's generally the vibe I get here. It is not aggressive. It is not... every harsh edge has been shaved off. Even the guitar tone feels soft. It's just not... It's not going to rub anyone the wrong way. and I think it's a really great sound for what it does, but I do usually have to be in the mood for it. It's almost a little too safe in some ways. But here I think it's interesting to start this off because we will build from here. We have some wild time signatures in Crash, 7/4, 5/4. We have a really slow 3/4 at the final point in it. They play around with time signatures quite a bit. 7 actually shows up a few times on this entire suite. I think it's interesting how sometimes we will get the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, where you have the shorter pulse and then the longer pulse, and sometimes we'll get the opposite of that with the 4 first and the 3 second, which makes it feel like, see, the difference is in feeling. Having the 3 first establishes, oh, we're in 3, and then the 4 feels longer. It feels like we are dragging things out. When we start on the 4 first, oh, we're in 4/4. Then the 3 feels shortened. It feels like we're rushing or tripping into that next bar. And so while they're both 7/4 time signature, they both have very different time feels to them, and they're going to imply different emotional weights. One feels like dragging, one feels like rushing. There are some very tasty vocal harmony stacks in here. We don't get a lot of vocal harmony across this suite. The only time I took this note again, I think, was Shell. Yes, dude, that country-esque chord stack that we have in the chorus of Shell. What is that song called? Where's Spotify? Solitary Shell. Yeah, dude, I love that. I could melt into that vocal stack. Those were the only 2 times that vocal harmonies really stood out to me. Now, halfway through Crash, though, we begin to introduce a little bit of darkness. I think this was the part of the song where we had a 4-chord progression, and it was the second chord that really got a little bit of darkness, and then it lightened up over the 3rd and 4th for a nice resolution. And this was a sort of foreshadowing for where we would go, because 3.5 minutes into this track, we get some really heavy metal with a dark piano. This is where the 5/4 kicks in. It's pretty intense. We get a moody guitar solo not long after this, really taking the darker vibes and pushing them into something that feels melancholic. There's a nice bass lick underneath. I don't think I'm supposed to comment on that because this section is supposed to introduce the slower 3/4 melancholy that wraps this track up. So brightness with a touch of darkness, and then some really dark piano work, and then some moody guitar work, and then a melancholic outro. We were supposed to be descending emotionally in this, and I'm like, hey, I like that bass lick. Just like pulls me out of that transfer. But this movement downwards and the slowing down takes us into War, which starts off with just toms. It's very heavy. It's very eerie. A lot of the notes being played are sharp and abrupt, where Crash actually had us exploring some longer legato style playing, although getting more and more sharper and staccato as we went on. Here it's just everything's very abrupt and sharp. There's not a lot of softness to anything. Everything is heavily articulated. It feels aggressive in a lot of ways. Now, this song's only 2 minutes long. This is pretty much everything I have to say about it, is that it is sharp and aggressive, but I do have to bring up the vocals. I love the belted vocals. In the chorus, we have the call and response with the center belted vocals, and then the response from the outside. They're kind of, they're not as belted, but they're still legato, long held out note style. This is in contrast to the verse, which is very Dave Mustaine. Not a perfect what do they call it? When you try to mimic someone else. Impersonation. But it definitely evokes the vibe. And like I had mentioned, the song is called War Inside My Head, which as soon as I read that when getting everything set up, I immediately heard the verse of Sweating Bullets. There's a war inside my head. And I'm like, it was like, oh yeah, Megadeth. I want to listen to Sweating Bullets now, but I got to record the video, so maybe I'll put that on a playlist. I'll check it out later. But then of course we get to this track and he pulls out the Dave Mustaine style vocals. It just cracked me up. It's like, hey, Dream Theater, you and I are on the same wavelength with this. That phrase, you can't read it without hearing Dave say those words. Uh, so that's that track. I thought it was fine, and it was a nice movement away from Crash. Like I said, we had this aggressive downward spiral into it. I think that worked really well. Of course, this song goes into another metal track. We keep all of that energy going to the test that stumped them all. And this is very fast. We start off with crazy synth shredding, crazy guitar shredding. It's in 7/4. It's just a wild ride. Aggressive speed, aggressive delivery. These are definitely metal guitar tones. They sound not quite like buzzsaws, but definitely going in that direction. It is a lot more aggressive than the guitars we saw on Crash, and definitely more aggressive than the guitars we heard on War. War inside my head. Um, there is a lot of snare on here though, and when you bring the snare together with the guitar sound and the guitar riffs, a lot of pedal tone on the guitar riffs too, and something about the vocal delivery. I had mentioned that it reminds me of Metallica around the Injustice for All era of their writing, and I specifically mean that too. Like I think Master of Puppets compositionally is very similar, but there's something sonically about and Justice for All that this song reminded me of, like a production thing on top of the composition. Um, and I find that really interesting because that means back to back we got Megadeth and Metallica, and this isn't the first time I brought this up. And I can't remember. It was at Octavarium. Um, that song though, I also commented that there was some Megadeth and Metallica inspired riffs, I think, in that song. And the riffs pretty much dominate sections because I remember that song being very segmented. But yeah, I don't know if they do this often, but this is twice now. Oh, it is Octavarium. Very cool. I got it right. Dang, I checked that back out. I checked that out back in 2020. Not only did I probably look young, but I did not have the good old Music Galaxy in my background yet either. Um, dang. But I find this really interesting. But it's really only the verse that gives the Metallica vibes. And if anyone wants to comment on this, please let me know about the whole, inspirations thing where they bring up their Megadeth or Metallica sound in their music. It's not something that I think happens all the time. But again, I've only heard like 6 or 7 tracks from this group, and it's shown up twice. Unless y'all are just giving me songs where this happens, it seems to be a recurring thing for them. But I think it's fun. It's Metallica, man. There's no way that you have a band in the 90s and 2000s, a metal band, and not be influenced by them in some way. So I think it's nice just to kind of put that out there occasionally. As Dream Theater, as this big band who's influenced other groups, to say also, we're not immune to this. We're not totally original either. We really like other people's music too, and it's influenced us. So I like that. The chorus in here is interesting though. It's almost like System of a Down, fun vocal delivery, spoken word stuff, where it's kind of sing-songy, but it's not singing, and the inflections are kind of awkward. Like you would not speak this way, you wouldn't really sing this way either. It's sort of weird way of delivering these lines. And then it is juxtaposed with a falsetto response to the call, split out to the sides again, just like the War Inside My Head's chorus. So call in the center, response to the sides. But we have this weird spoken word versus this fun falsetto. And System of a Down's the first band that popped into my head. I'm sure there's plenty. I know y'all have. We've explored some bands like Mr. Bungle, who would have influenced bands like System of a Down. So, influences can just go way back. System of a Down is kind of where my point of reference is for that, but that doesn't mean they're the first band to ever do something like this. So it's a really weird juxtaposition between Metallica and fun, weird vocal jumping around. We enter into some groove metal. We have a pretty killer guitar solo here, some wild drum patterns moving into the outro of this track, which is just very dark and heavy. I mean, it's already pretty heavy song throughout, but we end up going towards a lot of, just play a chugging pedal tone underneath and put shred on top of it. And this sort of fades out, this heaviness, into Goodnight Kiss, which is a chill, reverbery, synthy track. It kicks off with something feeling very dreamlike. We're at a beach. I can hear waves hitting the sand. There's birds squawking overhead. A child begins to say stuff. I don't know what they were saying. Some very soft vocals come over this and begin singing. There's a little bit of darkness underneath, but it's something that's more alluded to rather than dwelt within. We have some gorgeous classical piano riffs that come on top of this. The bass tone in this whole section is solid. It's a symphonic pop ballad. It does a great job of crafting this heavy atmosphere while still keeping some levity to it, implying a darker emotion without actually creating a melancholic sound. It's not a depressing song overall, but it is heavier. It takes a while to get through this, though. The slow tempo of the ballad makes it a bit slower moving, despite being, I think, the longest part of the suite at 6-something minutes. Let me double check this. It is the longest one, 6:17. Despite that, there's not a lot going on in here. In fact, I think the test was more complex and had more movement and ideas in it than this track did. But this was just a lot of shorter ideas stretched out to fill the time because of the slower tempo. There is a really beautiful emotional guitar solo towards the end of this, though. Not bluesy. Usually when I find myself being emotionally worked in a negative way by a guitar solo, it's usually the blues scale. Bluesy guitar solos, especially the guitar solos you get from blues rock, just absolutely work for me every time. I feel like the bends, the wailing, it's such an evocative sound. We didn't get that here, though, and it still affected me, which I think is a good sign. It means the composition was super solid here, and it didn't really rely on production tricks, the sound of the instrument or the bending of notes and stuff like that to evoke the feeling. I'm not saying that is like a shortcut or anything. It doesn't make it easier. You still got to write a solid solo, even if it's blues rock. But at least for me personally, as a listener, this means Dream Theater had to go the extra mile. They really had to hook me with the storytelling of the melody. But what I loved about it, it's already a bit of a higher pitched solo, but it begins to work itself higher and higher to these really thin notes. And as it's growing, as it's rising in pitch, it's also moving out of this melancholic sound into something more positive and hopeful. There's an optimism here that feels like a fake out. I wanted to stay here. But about 4.5 minutes into the 6-minute track, we hit a really dark 4 on the floor. The energy feels high, but it feels brooding. There's a choir on the outskirts, and they are not making me feel optimistic at all. And then there's some spoken word, there's overlapping ideas, there's laughter, there's crying, there's screaming, there's, I think, the beeping of an EKG. It definitely presents a hospital setting, but the laughter continues to throw me off here. I don't remember if this transitioned well into Solitary Shell or not. I didn't write anything about a transition here, so I'm not sure. But here we have this song was wild. This is like 2000s pop rock right here. Your typical vulnerable college boy with a bit of a lighter voice to them, with an acoustic guitar, just talking about their emotions. You don't get more stereotypical or cliche of a specific style of music than what Dream Theater put on here for Solitary Shell. And the addition of the synths is just fantastic, because while that wasn't necessarily where this kind of pop rock started, it is definitely where it moved into. And I don't know specifically when that happened. So I don't know if Dream Theater was being prophetic with that, or if they were being influenced by styles that were already popular. But 2002, I think the synth pop rock thing had already started to take off, but y'all rock and metal historians, you can let me know about that. There's not much to say about this track. The poppy vocals are fantastic. I love the vocal stacks. As I mentioned earlier in the video, there's this country-ish vocal duet that we have in the chorus that just I can melt into. I love whatever chords they sing there. It's just fantastic. This whole song, as I mentioned during the reaction, is just very vulnerable and down to earth. Everything else in here, for the most part, either has a larger than life progressive element to it or a larger than life metallic element to it. Even when we have some of these softer rock tracks, like the first time we got through Crash, it's still very layered. It's still very dramatic and over the top. But here, everything just feels very rooted, very grounded. Just feels like your average Joe from next door grabbed the guitar and started playing and singing. And that's definitely what they're going for, I think. It ends in a weird place, though. For such a normal, standard, mainstream start, we end up getting to the weirdest time signature on the entire track, 15/16, or at least that's how I counted it. It would be just a hair bit more than 7/8, and we've had a lot of sevens in here. I've been counting them as 7/4 because that's easier for me to feel out, but generally speaking, I think they're probably in 7/8. The nice thing with time signatures is that most time signature stuff is just math, and you can make any song in any time signature, and it doesn't change the way it sounds. It's more about reading. It's more about how you would read the music if you were reading the sheet music. And so if we're in 7/8 and we double those numbers, we get 14/16. Which is identical to 7/8. We're just focusing on quarter beats. That's where the 16th comes from. Every quarter of a beat you're going to count, and we usually count those with and, E and So 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and that's 16 phonetic sounds. So that's where the 16 on the bottom comes from. And we're looking at 14 of those rather than 16. So we're only going to make it to 3.5. 1E and a 2E and a 3E. 1E and a 2E and a 3E. And that's the beat for 7/8 or 14/16 in this case. But if we add just one more to that. Actually, no, it would be 3E and. We would and on the and. Yeah, the and is the half beat. So if we add one more and do the 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and 4E and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and 1E and a 2. And so we add just a little bit more than we previously did. We add a quarter of a beat more. That's where 15/16 comes in. It is tough to count. It is a very fast section. I would wager that most of this is muscle memory from hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of practice until you don't have to think about counting to 15 at a really quick pace anymore. 15/16 isn't super unusual. We've actually covered it on the channel actually before. I said actually twice. That's how crazy it is. But it is certainly not common. But then after this, I think we go back into a 4/4 and we have two solos. We have a very heavy picked guitar solo. I thought this was beautifully dark but slightly aggressive. It kind of feels like Spanish guitar at times, but without finger picking, instead using a very heavy picked style. But it also feels jazzy-ish, like rock jazz. Not jazz fusion, but rock jazz. Maybe I'll try to explain that another day. I don't have time for that today. um, it's a little all over the place, and I find it difficult to figure out exactly what's going on here, aside from the fact that it is very heavily picked. Each note has such an attack on it. It is just a fierce sound in general, despite the softness of acoustic guitar. This transfers over into a very gorgeous classical piano solo that isn't as aggressive in its attack. I didn't understand this part. The solos themselves, beautiful. How we got from that 15/16 to this jazzy Spanish heavy picked guitar stuff to this classical piano, I don't remember being able to follow that, even if I enjoyed all the sections individually. It was a wild whirlwind of things. This takes us to Crash 2. Not a lot to say here, other than we have another prog rock, like contemporary prog rock chorus on here. I even wrote down Frost chorus. Like I said earlier, this is just a band that this style of music reminds me of. But we actually kick it off with something that feels very hair metal. And I actually rescinded this comment during the reaction. I was like, oh, this reminds me of hair metal. And I was like, nah, actually it doesn't. And then the vocals came in and I was like, oh, wait, yeah, dude, this does. Like a little bit, like 30% hair metal DNA in there somehow. Very weird section. It comes off as rather groovy, which informs later on when we hit the bridge, and which is a 6/8, very groovy section with gallops. Da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. Harmonically, though, this kind of moves in a folky direction, and they stick with a baseline idea and build up off of it. This is not something I hear Dream Theater do too often. There is usually the introduction of the sound and then the expansion. It's a two-step process. This is something that Dream Theater loves to do and is actually exceptionally effective. You can find this not just in Dream Theater, but in hundreds of thousands, probably millions of bands, and even, composers going back thousands of years. You introduce an idea and then you create an embellishment of the idea. This is the theme and variation just taken to the most condensed form of it. Hit the theme, create a variation on it. Hit a new theme, create a variation on it. But here, they hit the theme and stick with it. And then they build the section on top of it. This is more of a slow burn that I would expect in other styles of music. Progressive metal just isn't one that I typically associate with a slow burn like this. At least not this kind of progressive metal. You want to give me like a heavier Porcupine Tree track or Opeth. Opeth has done slow burns, but Dream Theater is just not a band who I think of slow burns, and they did one here. So I think it's interesting that the more I listen to them, the more that I have like an idea of their core sound, who they are. You can give me 15 seconds of any of their songs practically, and I'll be like, okay, that's Dream Theater. With the exception, of course, there are several places on this single song where I'm like, oh, this is interesting for Dream Theater. But generally speaking, they have a very iconic sound. But they're not afraid to try new things. They're not afraid to take other concepts and tweak it and put it into their own sounds. And this is one of those areas. I've never heard a slow burn from them, but they've done one. Then we enter into this weird medley. This is the second time we've hit a medley on this song. The first time, though, of course, was the Overture, which makes sense for a medley. It's an Overture. But this one is awkward too. Some parts are dark, some are jazzier, some are moodier, some are classical, some are very aggressive and metallic, and we even have a little bit of Christmas in here, which has shown up elsewhere. I can't remember where we heard that the first time, but given that this is Crash Reprise, it was probably on Movement 2 Crash the first time around. Is there more to that? About to Crash, that's what it's called. I keep calling them by the single word titles that I have written down, but the titles are so much longer than that. We end on some super dark vibes that takes us to a grand epic ending, kicking off finale. It's just a really big section. The orchestration comes back. It feels epic. It feels larger than life. This, though, slips down into arpeggiating guitars with soft drumming and softer vocals. I don't understand this at all. We went through a strange medley, got really dark and heavy, busted through that darkness to find positivity, and then got chill. The series of events I'm not able to understand narratively. I'm going to chalk it up to the fact that this is 40 minutes of music, and maybe it requires more context. And maybe if I had a better understanding of the overall narrative, it might make more sense. But there's a lot of places in here where I'm like, why are we doing this? It doesn't fit where we came from. It doesn't really take us anywhere where we're going. It just is a way to fill space. And it's a cool idea. But how is it connected to anything? I had that feeling a lot during this track. But we have a very cool vocal harmony in the chorus. This leads to very big orchestral chords that sit underneath the song and outside of it. This is interesting because the first time that we had the orchestra, they dominated the sound. They were everything. And if there were electric guitars, they were the secondary function, the secondary feature to the track. This feels more like your typical run-of-the-mill symphonic metal band who writes a metal song and then takes a couple violins and makes them play chords outside of the metal song. It gives it the symphonic flair without actually doing anything of interest with the violins. That's what happens here. Now, on the contrary, I'm not going to say that there is nothing of interest here. The eventual choir and the orchestra fill out a lot of space, and they really emphasize the emotional element that the guitars kind of aren't. I do wish the orchestra was used a bit more densely here. I will say that this is a less layered track than any of the others. It's more emotionally charged, though. It does more with less, in a sense. And of course, all of this goes through a few different emotions before landing on that big, hopeful finish with 2 minutes to go. And then the random gong and the gong drone. Why? Why? I don't know, man. I just really don't know. So, that is a pretty general look at the track. A couple of things I want to bring up. The vocal work throughout this is fantastic consistently, whether they are going for a bit more of a lighter sound, a bit of more of a grittier metallic sound, the belted vocals, the harmony stacks, they sound great. And they are a bit of a chameleon too. Not that I would completely lose them in a song, but there are a few different projections and styles of vocals used on this that does showcase a little bit of variety that the vocalist has up their sleeve. The drumming on here is fantastic from start to finish. Portnoy's drumming is always excellent, but I think this is a great display of both his more technical side of playing, but also his more melodic side of playing. There are a few places in here when my jaw just hit the floor because I really love what he's doing, not because he's keeping time, but because he's melodically playing along with the guitars. He has a lick going on, a pattern going on that's, the purpose isn't to keep time, it's to help with the emotional element of the track, to aid in the atmosphere. I really love moments like that. There's also a lot of cool drum fills going on that pull us from one idea to the next. A lot of triplet mod across this track. But there is a lot of marching snare too. What is this? Why is it everywhere? It makes sense in the metallic styled test song, but elsewhere it always felt a little out of place. And it kept popping up too. Is Portnoy another snare drummer like Lars? Or or is there a thematic reason to use the snare as often as it is on this suite? I don't know. But I did want to put a little shout out to those. The bass sounded excellent in most places. There were a few places where they got to shine. I do kind of wish the bass was either a little louder in the mix or played more. Either way, I didn't hear it doing a lot of interesting stuff constantly. It was more of every once in a while, oh yeah, we got a bassist. Let's give them something nice to play, and they'll get a cool little lick, and they'll get to play it for like 8 bars, and then they'll be forgotten about for another movement or two. And the thing is, I've heard this bassist do some wild stuff. Well, I've heard a Dream Theater bassist. I don't know if it's the same bassist that was on this track. I don't know what kind of personnel changes they've had over the years. So maybe it's a different bassist, but I assume any bassist who plays for Dream Theater is going to be skilled enough to play more than pedal tones. So that was something I kind of missed. But when the bassist did get to shine, I quite enjoyed those moments, and I pointed them out pretty much every time. So everybody got moments to shine here. The composition was solid throughout. A lot of it is on the iterative side of things, but the reason that they're iterative is because they work, they're solid, and I think that the point is not to recreate the wheel, but recreate the car. To use a metaphor, and I think they did that. This song does a great job of taking a lot of iterative ideas and smashing them together in new and creative ways to form this 40-minute suite of ideas that I'm not going to say are totally connected, but there are some nice themes that move throughout many of them. Let me hit the lyrics on this one. This video is getting really long, and we'll see what's going on there. Alright, so this song is about mental health awareness, which, that's cool. Not what I would expect from Dream Theater. I don't know why. I don't really know a lot about what they sing about. I don't know what their like common lyrical themes are, but for some reason mental health aware. I guess it's just because like it's not a very metal thing. I mean, it depends. I think it's because this is so earnest. There's definitely songs about mental health in general, but it's usually from like more of a horror angle side of it rather than look at these normal people, they just need help, right? They just need to be understood. This feels more sincere about it, and trying not to paint it as anything wild. And I think the music being more palatable generally also aids in this perception of the lyrics, at least from my point of view. The Overture, Movement 1, is an overture. It says that it serves as the foundation of what's to come, and that many of the sections do end up elsewhere in the suite. So I'm interested for a second listen to kind of see if I can't pick those out. What's interesting, though, is Portnoy had mentioned that they approached it as if they were scoring a movie or writing a piece of classical music. I was spot on with that call. It does feel like score music. It really does. I think they did a great job at that. About to Crash is about a woman going through bipolar disorder. One of the verses talks about how she can't stop pacing, but she's never felt so alive. Her thoughts are racing. They're set on overdrive. She talks about how meaningless it is when she gets into the depressive moments and how she just feels like life doesn't matter, and she cries. She just wants it to end. It then talks about how normal she is, though. Raised in a small Midwestern town by a charming and eccentric loving father, she was praised as the perfect teenage girl and everyone thought highly of her. Until one day she woke up to find that this perfect girl had lost her mind. Says that she helplessly stands by. All she wants to do is cry. No one ever knew she was so sad. What's interesting, I think, is one, yeah, saying that normal person just develops this mental issue. But I really like here at the end, it says, in the face of misery, she found hopefulness. She had weathered the depression. much to her advantage. She resumed her frantic pace, boundless power, midnight hour, she enjoyed the race. It almost seems as if there's an element of masking here where she covers up the more visually noticeable elements of this. And so she uses the manic parts to her benefit. Says that she'll stay up till the midnight hour with so much energy and such a frantic pace. But that when it comes to the depressive part, she puts on a face of hopefulness and just weathers it. She gets through it so no one worries about her. The problem is if you hide something like this, you can't get it treated. Which in this case might be fine at the moment. I don't know how controversial this is, but I think there's a really big difference between when something impedes your life and when it doesn't, when it becomes a problem and when it isn't. It definitely should be something that is tracked, though. Your doctor should know about it, and even if you're not put on any sort of medication or techniques, maybe breathing or meditation help with stuff like this. But just so someone with medical knowledge can keep track of this and kind of see if anything progresses in a negative way. But there is an element of masking here. She's hiding the worst parts. I'm kind of curious if this is why this is the only track that gets a reprise, because the reprise does seem to be about this woman again. Now, War Inside My Head is about PTSD. I think this is really interesting because anybody, well, particularly military PTSD, it's about a military veteran who saw some wild things, and now it states, I'm hearing voices from miles away, seeing shadows in the light of day, waging a war inside my head. Basically remembering all of this traumatic stuff to where it affects you now, even though none of it's real anymore, it's just your memories. Really takes a different turn on that phrase, war inside my head. But it's very short lyrically compared to many of the other tracks, and part of that is probably just the 2-minute runtime. It gets in, it says what it needs to say, and gets out. It's very direct and straightforward in what it's about, but it is another person with a mental disorder. Movement 4, The Test That Stumped Them All, is about a schizophrenic who is admitted to a mental ward, and what's the proper term for that these days? I don't think it's a mental ward. Mental health facility, is that what it would be called today? And none of the doctors can fix them. And I'll put fix in quotations, but they use words like, the boy's simply crazy, suffering from delusions. He lives in a world of fiction. We have just the place to fix him, to save him from himself. Really views it as a problem to fix. Also looking at him as lesser than. Talks about how the place that he's in smells of stale sweat and shit. He talks about the random urine testing and all of the different colored pills he has to take. He's gone to all sorts of counseling and therapy, but no one knows what's up, so he just curls up in the darkness. Finally, though, as so much media about this tends to focus on, is the archaic idea of shock treatment. And that's what the doctors suggest right before the outro. Now I want to take a moment to talk about some of the stuff here. Crash has their poppy vocals, very light, progressive rock sounds, but also the shift into darker and more melancholic sounds. We shift between the two of those. I believe that's attempting to create a manic and a depressive feeling, although the bright side doesn't feel very manic to me. It feels more normal versus depressed. I still think the duality is intentional. War, with its sharp, heavy tones and heavy use of toms, And the pedal tone, I think, is it's supposed to evoke sounds of war, gunfire, and explosions. The test that stumped them all, which I'm just now understanding the title, that they view this as a test to solve or to win or to correct, that the person is the test. They're not treating them as a subject, but as a mental check to say, oh, are you smart enough to fix this person? Are you smart enough to pass this test? All those years in school, can you fix him? Instead of viewing him as a human, a person with feelings and rights and all this stuff. But this is also a very frantic song. This is very Metallica. And it's very dark and heavy throughout, but the ending gives us a lot of pedal tone and shred, which I think is supposed to evoke the ideas of the shock treatment and the pain of that. Interestingly, it fades out to the track Goodnight Kiss, which is a exceptionally melancholic track that I don't think the lyrics necessarily showcase too much. There's definitely the pain in that guitar solo I talked about at the end, and the dark energy that wraps the song up. But generally speaking, I don't think the song captures the right emotion for this. It's about a woman whose young child, possibly even baby, died. I don't know if it was just a young death or maybe if it was a stillbirth or something like that, but the song is about wanting to see her girl again. And not being able to. And it's just such a dark set of lyrics. Not dark, just heavy, emotionally heavy lyrics to get through. There is one really cool twist here. I had mentioned that the lyrics, "You're just a poor girl," reminds me of Bohemian Rhapsody, but it's actually said twice here. The first time, "You're just a poor girl afraid of the cruel world and taken away from it all." But at the end, it shifts to, "I'm just a poor girl afraid of the cruel world." And I think drawing that parallel between her child and herself is a very powerful moment in that track. Solitary Shell is about an introvert, possibly an autistic child. Says that he learned to walk and talk on time as expected, but that he never cared much to be held, so they're not a big fan on being touched. Most of this song is about saying how this person is fine in every way, except that they retreat into their solitary shell. They're not a big fan of relationships. They're not a big fan of physical contact. They just kind of keep to themselves. And everybody else struggles to understand why this person would just want to be by themselves all the time. I find that interesting because it is the most vulnerable track on the album musically. It's the one that I called, your average Joe from next door picks up an acoustic guitar and starts singing. That's what this feels like. And I think maybe that works for the idea of just crafting a sound for an ordinary person. But I think it's also very interesting that this person doesn't open up to anybody physically or emotionally, and the song feels like the most vulnerable type of music of the time, about just opening yourself up to everyone. I find that to be an interesting duality there. About to Crash Reprise, as I had mentioned, we bring back the bipolar lady. And it shows that she still has really high days. She calls it boundless energy with euphoric fixation, but that she also has days where all she wants to do is cry. And at the end, she asks, "Who will be standing by? Will you be standing by?" And this was actually mentioned in the first time through, and I just kind of skipped over it, but there's an implication that her father, as it was said, oh yeah, she was a Midwestern town girl raised by a charming and eccentric, loving father. And there's a couple lines in there that talk about their relationship and how close they were. I wonder if this is years, decades later, and maybe their relationship isn't as strong. And so she knew that when she got low, she could get her dad to help her through those moments if she couldn't mask it. But maybe she doesn't have that emotional support anymore. And so, even though I think she is one of the people in this suite who, in a sense, is let off the easiest, her mental health disorder is the least affecting to her life. We see that even years later, it can get worse. And this is what I was talking about. Like, even if you want to hide it, even if you just want to deal with it, you still gotta tell someone about it. Preferably a medical specialist in case anything happens, because you don't know what the future's like. You might be able to manage it now, but can you manage it tomorrow? In 5 years, 10 years, a few decades? We get to the final part, losing time. And I don't know about this one too much. Half of it is about a woman. Says she dresses in black every day, never wears makeup, and keeps her hair simple, but no one cares what she did anyway. She can't recall yesterday, faces are twisted and strange, but she always wakes up only to find she's been miles away. So maybe multiple personality? I don't know. Not being able to remember yesterday feels like amnesia, but if another personality was in control at the time, maybe it's a dissociative thing. But it says that she's learned to detach herself. It's a behavior that kept her alive. And that's the end of her story, really. Then we kind of wrap everything up thematically. Hope in the face of human distress, it helps us to survive. There's shame and disgrace over mental unrest, it keeps us from saving those we love. Deception of fame, vengeance of war, lives torn apart, losing oneself, spiraling down, feeling the walls closing in, a journey to find the answers inside our elusive mind. So basically just saying, people with mental health disorders, they're just normal people. It could be anyone. And instead of demonizing them, instead of creating a stigma around it, we need to, as they say, shame and disgrace over it. We just need to accept it in no different than a medical disorder. And just say, okay, this is a part of who you are. How do we work with this? What kind of medical attention do we need? What kind of treatments are available? How do we go about this? And just make sure that the people we love get the help they need. Now, 2002, 2003, I feel like this was a bit more of a powerful statement. 2002. Especially again from a prog rock group. It's just not a message I really feel is something I find too prominently associated with the style of music. But I think even in the early 2000s, this wasn't something you were going to find pretty much anywhere. Mental health awareness, as far as I see it in Western pop culture, really started coming into prominence as a normal thought to have. Like, let's just treat mental health like any other health. Mid 2010s, maybe late 2000s. But when I really started seeing more of it, especially around social media, was early to mid 2010s. It really hasn't been that long that I think it's kind of been normalized. So, yeah, this was before the time, I'm pretty sure, but also not a genre I would expect to hear it from. So it's pretty cool that they're doing it, even if I think the final 9 lines of this, give or take, are kind of tame and, well, duh, by 2025 standard. It's probably really wild to have seen back then, and I'm glad that someone was doing it. Going back to theme, I don't really see too much theme in Crash Part 2 or Goodnight. Well, actually, we talked about Goodnight. We talked about Solitary Shell, too. The finale, man, that's like, I like the big hopeful finish at 4, but what's the gong, man? That still doesn't make any sense to me. But I like the hope that's put in underneath while saying that we should just treat this like any other type of medical thing and not have a stigma around it. Let's push towards a brighter future for mental health awareness. Big, optimistic, powerful symphonic work and a nice, strong resolution. I'm on board for that. And then a gong. Why? What? I still don't get that part. It makes no sense to me. Maybe it makes sense on the album. I am missing the other 5 tracks to this. I don't know though. Geez, 2-hour reaction here. Y'all definitely got your money's worth today. These are my thoughts. 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence by Dream Theater. What do you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, or perspective on this track. Let me know. Put all that and any other thoughts you have down into the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.